Both presidential candidates are trying to downplay the importance of tomorrow night's debate, and you can bet they're hoping to sway some voters their way. The only problem, it may be too late. Voting in some critical battleground states has already started, and that includes Ohio and Florida. Some people even held a sleep out the vote rally last night in Columbus, Ohio, trying to be the first in line to cast a ballot. Aaron Schrockman from the Tampa Bay Times and Henry Gomez from the Cleveland Plain Dealer join me now. Welcome, gentlemen.
Happy to be here.
Thank you for having us.
So, Henry, I'd like to start with you. Were there a lot of people lined up to vote this morning?
Well, in Cuyahoga County, which also had to sleep out the vote, there were about 15 people who were there last night who stayed over. And then this morning, by 8:15, the polls opened at 8, there were already 200 people in line to vote, and they were expecting hundreds more throughout the morning in Cuyahoga, which is the most populous county in Ohio.
I know in 2008, lots of people chose to vote early in the state of Ohio. Will the early voting numbers match 2008?
Well, right now, they're thinking that the early voting numbers might exceed 2008. There are two ways that you can do it. You could do it by mail, which is still the most popular way to vote absentee and early, or you can do it in person Monday through Friday at your local Board of Elections between set hours. So yes, they are expecting it to exceed 2008 since more people are familiar with the options available to them.
So Aaron, I know there have been some challenges to Florida early voting. When it comes right down to it, how long will people be able to vote early this time around?
Yeah, in Florida, it's the same way as Ohio. There's two ways to early vote. There's one through absentee mail ballots. Those are in the mail today and over the next week, so voters who requested those ballots will be receiving them. Folks wanting the early vote, in 2008, they had 14 days, and Charlie Crist, the then Republican governor, actually extended early voting hours to allow more people to even cast ballots. Well, the Republicans in Florida changed that law in 2011 and said now you only have 8 days to vote. So really, early voting in Florida, in-person voting, doesn't start till October 27th and goes through that final Friday before the election. The Democrats say, hey, we want to vote on that final Sunday. It's a big turnout day for African Americans. Republicans say we just want to have the fairest and fraud-free election possible, so we need that break in between the end of early voting and November 6th, Election Day.
Okay, so 8 days people have to early vote in Florida. So what's the turnout been like in Florida?
Well, the turnout is going to be interesting to see. Actually, in 2008, more than half of the ballots cast for the presidential election were cast before Election Day. So you had this really interesting thing of you have, Barack Obama and then John McCain coming barnstorming through the state when a lot of the votes were already cast. We're expecting a similar picture in 2012. Obviously, Florida is the biggest swing state in America, 29 electoral votes. Already, Republicans and Democrats are organizing lawyers in every one of Florida's 67 counties to get ready to challenge ballots. Already we're hearing stories of potential voter registration fraud from a group that's aligned with the Republican Party of Florida. So it's Florida. It's every year. It's every election that there's lots of questions, and this is just another year. So I'm sorry you're going to have to deal with us, put up with us through November 6th. Hopefully we'll get it right.
Florida, Florida, Florida. Henry, critics of early voting say people are already voting. The presidential debates haven't even happened yet, and something could well happen in those presidential debates to change people's minds, and that's maybe why we shouldn't have early voting, because there's just not enough time.
Well, sure, you hear that argument, and there are a lot of voters who are waiting till at least tomorrow night's debate before, sending in their absentee ballot or before showing up at the Board of Elections to vote. But really, one thing I wanted to point out is we're facing a similar situation here in Ohio as in Florida. This weekend before Election Day, back in 2008, it was open for early in-person voting at the Board of Elections. It was an advantage that many Democrats took advantage of. They would organize buses from Sunday church services or from union offices and bus folks down to the Board of Elections to vote. That window right now is in flux because the state Republican officials challenged it. A federal judge ordered that banning those 3 days in person was unconstitutional, and now there's an appeal process. So there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding those final 3 days. So there's still a lot of time for people to vote, a 35-day window, and I imagine that many will wait until that last week or so to do so.
And, Republicans would say they're just trying to make sure there's no voter fraud during this election, and that's why there have been all these efforts, to kind of like trim back early voting. I mean, Aaron, from your reporting, what's the real reason behind this?
Well, there's the reason they say is, again, to curb fraud. But when you look at the anecdotal evidence, I think someone here with the American Civil Liberties Union in Florida pointed out that I think there are more shark attacks in the state of Florida than actual cases of voter fraud. And what's really interesting when you drill down at what the cases of voting fraud actually are, they all happen to do with absentee ballots or voter registration, which the Republicans have tried to tamp down a little bit, but really they haven't touched absentee ballots. And when you look at who does what, at least in Florida, if you're voting by mail and absentee, you're more likely to be a Republican. If you vote in person, you're more likely to be Democrat. And Republicans in 2011 in the Florida legislature really targeted early voting to try to limit the opportunities in some ways for fraud, but also maybe limit access to the ballot box as well. And that's an argument that's actually playing out in courts here in Florida. Some Democrats accuse Republicans of essentially unfairly targeting minority voters by curbing the number of days of early voting in this state.
Aaron Trockman from the Tampa Bay Times, Henry Gomez from the Henry Gomez. I can't say your name fast when I say it together. Henry Gomez from the Cleveland Plain Dealer. Thanks to you both for being here with us this morning.